Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. All right, first question. What's your take on saunas? I've been going in one almost every day. Do you think it is good for me while trying to gain strength and muscle while doing your 5x5 program? Or do you think saunas will hinder my gains? Saunas are kind of an interesting topic. I'm going to say due to the heat, it's probably more beneficial than it is detrimental. And I think people do need to understand that there is a certain amount of fatigue that can be associated with too much heat, particularly if you don't stay hydrated, right? And hydration is not just water, it's about your salts. But by that same token, there's also a recovery component and a relaxation component with it. Again, the heat itself can over time help increase blood flow. And that extra blood flow that you might get from it, particularly if you can stay properly hydrated, may facilitate extra recovery. Keep in mind, this is a major point of contention. It's a point of debate as to how much it will help versus hurt. But I think most experts out there agree it's going to lean in the direction of being more useful than detrimental, particularly if you can stay hydrated. Now, here's the other thing to think about with it in terms of recovery. Do you find it relaxing? Do you find it relaxing? Because one of the better things that we can do, again, particularly post-training, is going to be anything that increases circulation and helps relax us. Because what we want to do as a result of our training, we want that stress response. We want that inflammatory response. But later into the day, after we train, we want our body to bring that inflammation back into normal levels. We want to recover. We need to bring our stress levels down. And when you can do that, that will facilitate better recovery. So if you find the sauna particularly relaxing, it's going to have an added benefit there. And I think that's true of anything that you find that either helps relax you or improves blood flow. Generally speaking, is going to be beneficial to your training, right? Because it is about recovery. We're all about stress recovery adaptation. That's the goal of all of this. So we want to stress ourselves with an adaptative stress, and then we need to be able to recover from it. And stress management itself is a big part of recovery. So I'm going to say that's another thing that you have to factor in is psychologically for you. Do you find the sauna to be very relaxing? If you're one of those people who find it very relaxing, I'm going to say absolutely that's going to be beneficial to you. And that's the way I would look at it. All right, next question. Hey coach, thoughts on doing swimming for your cardio 4 times a week instead of jogging/brisk walking? Good question. So it comes down to what you're doing cardio for. If you're doing cardio for calorie burn, or more importantly, active recovery and just improving your endurance, I don't think it really matters. Cardio is cardio. So if you're talking about conditioning work as part of general physical preparedness, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it doesn't matter that much. In fact, varying your cardio can be beneficial. In fact, as far as jogging goes, a lot of experts would say if you haven't been trained to jog properly, you haven't had any real running instruction. There's running itself, and jogging has its own set of biomechanical errors. It's its own sport, and it's something that, if done incorrectly, has its own injuries, its own overuse injuries, its own interference with recovery. So if you're jogging purely for the cardiovascular benefits and the conditioning benefits rather than a sport-specific situation because you want to be a better runner, right? And being a better runner is important for certain jobs, right? Obviously, people in the military run for a reason. People in various jobs do run for different reasons or for a sport-specific reason where you might need to run for whatever. You might be in a running sport or in a sport where you need to run, right? There's a benefit and a merit to doing that. But if you're just talking about just conditioning for the purposes of either active recovery, improving endurance, improving work capacity, I'm going to say jogging may not always be your best bet. Something that is low impact, has a low risk of overuse injuries is probably a better way to go. What I mean, like you said, swimming is a great example. Swimming, cycling, jump rope, right? Those are all really good conditioning work. And what you need to remember at the end of the day, as far as conditioning goes, you need to be looking at what is the purpose of your conditioning. If you're doing it purely for the sake of conditioning without a sport-specific application, I would say any form of cardio that you enjoy, it keeps you active and works on your endurance without having its own major problems with overuse injuries, and swimming tends to not have much in the way of overuse. It's pretty low impact. probably the way to go. So it sounds just fine to me. I don't see any problem there. If you prefer swimming and have access to a pool instead of jogging, it's probably the better choice for general conditioning. Just don't expect it to make you as good at running as actually running or jogging will. All right, next question. Hi Jason, my press has stalled at 160 pounds. Squats, deadlifts, and rows are still increasing each week. Would trying concurrent training dynamic day and max effort day just for the press be a good way to progress on the press at this point? I don't know that it would, especially not at 160. Not at 160. And the reason I say that is the press is a more stubborn lift than those other lifts, right? It's a more stubborn lift than those other lifts. And so if you're able to increase at other exercises, I wouldn't start changing my programming just because the press has stalled. So I don't think if your squat in particular is still improving, you're probably not quite in need of concurrent training yet, right? You're probably not. What I would say is just get stronger at all your other pressing in general. Maybe figure out where your weak link is in your press, and if you need to add an extra movement, then by all means add an extra movement. If your triceps are weak, do some extra tricep work. Do what you need to do. But if you're still increasing weekly on your squats and your rows, I wouldn't say a stalled press is necessarily a good reason to go ahead and train your overall or change your overall training programming yet. I don't know that it warrants it. Because again, if you're making progress overall, I wouldn't let that one lift, which is a very stubborn lift, really dictate that. Because if you start doing concurrent for the press, it's going to affect your overall flow of your training. I mean, if you want to do it, go ahead by all means. But again, you're talking about majorly altering a program. What I would try first with the press, start taking longer breaks between your sets of press so you can handle heavier weights, no matter what rep range you're doing, and maybe start addressing some accessory movements for it at this point. Figure out where your weak link is in the press and address that. If your delts are weak, you might need to do some extra delt work. If your triceps are weak, you might need to do some extra tricep work. Or it could be that maybe you're pushing your benches going up and that's taking up extra fatigue and recovery, and so you're a little more tired by the time you get to your press. There's a lot of factors there at play. And I don't know that I would warrant a change in programming itself based upon just that one lift when the other stuff's still improving. Maybe just address the weak points, and it might be time to add a little bit of accessory work in. All right, next question. Hey coach, after following you, I've reached a 220 kilogram deadlift, 180 kg squat, 140 kg bench, and a 92.5 kilogram overhead press. But I've stalled and now cutting weight and losing strength on my 1 to 4 rep heavy sets. Where should I go from here? Feeling a little lost in terms of programming whilst on this cut. Oh man, yeah, you've reached that point. You're not a novice lifter anymore. You've got a solid base built, right? You have a solid base. That's a 5-plate deadlift, a 4-plate squat, 3-plate bench, and almost you're closing in on a 2-plate per side standing press. You're pretty well an advanced lifter. It's unfortunate, but the reality is now that you're an advanced lifter, you have to accept that some loss of strength happens when you cut. What I would say to you, find a good program you can enjoy, maintain those lifts, keep your fatigue management on point, cut slower if you're losing strength, bring the cut in a little bit, and just accept the fact that, unless you're going to cut super, super slow, or you're an advanced lifter, it's very hard to maintain strength. It's the nature of the game. This is why people bulk and cut. This is why things are done this way as a more advanced lifter. You have to just accept that fact. You're not a novice anymore. You're an advanced lifter. You have a hell of a base. And in order to increase that base or maintain it, you're going to have the nutrition and rest and everything else. And it's just hard to do when accompanied with fat loss. So I would say slow your cut down, keep your stress management in check, keep your fatigue management in check. Try to maintain your strength the best you can. Increase if you can, but accept that it may not be the case. Make adjustments as you go, but do them while putting thought into them. Don't do them under stress, and accept that this happens a little bit. And you know what? When you're finished with the cut, when you get to a weight that you can stabilize at for a little while, you'll be able to go back and work on your strength a little more. I mean, I feel your pain, brother. You've watched me go through this sort of stuff when cutting, right? It happens. It's just part of the game for an advanced lifter. But congratulations, you've built a good base and you've done a good job, so be proud of yourself and understand you just have to do things in phases now. All right, next question. Hey Jason, is it more likely to cause injury during training when you stretch your target muscles before the session? Is there a best way to stretch before your workout, like static versus dynamic? Thanks. Let's be honest here. Stretching hasn't been found to reduce injury. It's not really helpful for injury prevention. I'm not saying it's going to injure you, because it's probably not. But the research over the years on stretching before resistance training, as far as it reducing injuries, not really. It can help warm up the muscles a little bit as far as just getting some blood flow to them. So if you're going to stretch, it seems to be dynamic stretching seems to be the best way to go. Your problem with stretching before lifting is that static stretching seems to reduce performance potentially. All right, static stretching can reduce performance. Not saying it will, it's just showing that in some cases it can. So if you feel like you need to do some stretching, it's best to do dynamically, right? It's best to do dynamically. And even like stretching versions of your big exercises, right? I mean, that's part of your stretching warm-up. That can be dynamic in nature. That can be dynamic in nature. Doing lightweight, just ramping up a little bit with a similar movement pattern or the same lift you're going to do, right? That can help with stretching, and that's basically a form of dynamic stretching. Like if you just drop in and do some deep squats with a real light weight, even ass to grass, or a little deeper than you might do when you get to your big lift, that can help loosen things up. Same thing, I do know some people who feel like they need a little bit of extra mobility before they bench, so they either use a little bit of band work to do a dynamic type stretching to warm things up, or they grab some lighter dumbbells so you can get a deeper stretch than you can with the barbell, just to kind of mobilize everything a bit. So that falls back into the area of dynamic stretching, and that's a viable method. But yeah, you need to avoid static stretching when possible before you lift. And it's not about injury prevention, it's about just reduced performance and reduced work capacity. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.